This is a presentation that will share with you some information about responsibly researching responsibly, or as I like to call it, moving beyond the internet. So when you want to convince someone of something, when you want to persuade someone of something, you need to recall high quality evidence. Unless you're used to reading like Star Inquirer or something, you're going to be using high quality evidence that includes pathos, logos, and ethos. And you'll recall that ethos is basically trust or credibility. If you want your work to have credibility and be trustworthy, you need to have trustworthy information. So, where do we get that? Well, many people think about going to the internet. It is convenient. It has transformed the world like nothing other than in history but the printing press. But for research, it may be problematic. Just think about this meme right here. Gentleman says, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." Benjamin Franklin, 1974. And if you're not quite sure what's wrong with this, go talk to your history teacher. This isn't Benjamin Franklin. Didn't live in 1974, pre-internet time. So keep in mind as you're on the internet that anyone can create a site, even if the person has no actual expertise or ulterior motives. This leads to a lot of misinformation, a lot of bias, and a lot of falsehoods. I've read about a pregnant man on the internet. Not necessarily happening. Advertising metrics and conflicts of interest are often there, and sometimes the information that Google provides you first is the information that correlates with the paid advertisements that go with it. So keep that in mind. Greatest number of hits, greatest number of dollars do not equal greatest information, best information. There are also parodies, spoofs, counterfeits, and malicious sites. By malicious, I mean viruses that will attack your computers, things like that. But also counterfeit sites. There's a big difference between martinlutherking.org and martinlutherking.com and martinlutherking.edu. Same thing with whitehouse.gov, whitehouse.org, whitehouse.edu. People often create sites that look like someone else's sites, and just either to provide misinformation for political purposes or otherwise, or to get your credit card number, whatever. So there's a lot there to be wary of. And lastly, if all of this weren't enough, the internet simply just has too much out there. And when you're trying to research and get credible information quickly, there's just too much to sift through. Now, if you do go on the internet, these are some things you want to keep in mind. Websites that are associated with known professional or content-related organizations, like www.lung.org for the American Lung Association, those tend to be credible. Or organizations that end in .edu, .gov, or .org also tend to be more credible, though that's a tendency. Again, there are problems with martinlutherking.org in the form of racist material. Also look for the author or the sponsor, the publication date, or the history on the site, or any research citation, because all of that is telling you this was not created recently. This was considered and thoughtful as someone published it. And finally, compare the information on that site to the other sites that you have and see if that information is similar. If what you have is kind of far out and very different from the norm, it probably is not correct. However, there is a better alternative, and that's where we come to databases. What exactly are databases? They are collections of information, often for a particular topic or focus. They are reviewed for their content reliability and importance. People actually take time to go through and make sure that what's in there is actually useful and credible. They include journals, newspapers, magazines, books, government publications, and other trustworthy sources. They have access to very pricey scholarly or professional journal articles. So 30 years ago, you couldn't have gotten a hold of something from the American Medical Association unless you were a member. Now you can go to your library, use a database, and get that same information. The internet has been the social equalizer of our times. Internet databases also contain full text, like the full article, or they might contain abstracts. That's part of it as well. And finally, databases may even give you the citation information that you need for your Works Cited page. So another advantage of using databases. So we ask, what's in a database? Again, many different types of writing will go into a library database. And there are also many different types of library databases out there. EBSCO, Opposing Viewpoints, these are ones that you might see. So just be aware there are many different focuses, names, and types of databases, but each one of these is a collection of materials, a collection of newspapers, books, and journal articles. So when you get on a database, you're going to want to use some search strategies, perhaps the same as those you use on the internet. You'll want to use key terms and different combinations of those terms. You might get different results for the word child versus kid than you would get for just kid. You might get different results if you use the word consent instead of permission, or you might get different resources if you use the word laws versus legal. So try different words. Use quotation marks to narrow down when you've got a real key phrase. Online education in quotes is different than online education, where without the quotes it might bring up online gaming or something totally different. You can also take advantage of Boolean operators, and those are basically the words and, or not, and they're presented in these Venn diagrams here. If you use the word and, you're going to get any information about puppies and kittens, which is a narrow subset. If you use the word or, you might get an article solely about puppies, you might get an article solely about kittens, and you might get an article about both. And if you use the words puppy, not kitten, you would get information only about puppies and there wouldn't be any references to kittens in it. So you can use those search strategies no matter whether you use internet or databases. And remember, and this is one of my kind of pet peeves a little bit, good research does take time. If you go on and you try one search combination in one database, it doesn't come up with anything valuable, and you email me and say, there's nothing on the database for any of your topics, I would be extremely surprised. So try different search terms, different combination, different databases. It does take time to get good information. So with that, let me send you off to visit your local library in the electronic databases. Good luck.